2025 has brought something to the fandom that we haven't seen in years. A sense of electricity. Whisper networks, TikTok breakdowns, Reddit threads spinning at full speed. And at the center of it all, the NDA theory, as a non-disclosure agreement. So this is one of the most persistent, emotionally charged, and analytically fascinating fan discussions. I don't like to call it a theory because NDAs are a real thing. But if you haven't seen the NDA, you can only speculate what might be in it. But it it's a big point of discussion in the Harry Styles, Louis Tomlinson, One Direction, Larry Stylinson universe. Now, again, not as a legal fact because, again, until something's confirmed and the terms of the NDA ever come to light in a court, we don't know. But it is a cultural story that fans have been circulating on and pivoting to and referencing for a very long time. It's been refined and debated for more than a decade. So this is the NDA story / theory, and why fans think that this year might have finally broken the silence. So to understand the NDA theory, we have to, again, do a backdrop and a rewind back to the height of One Direction and its humble beginnings in 2010. So the NDA theory suggests essentially that Harry and Louis were subject to an extremely restricted confidentiality agreement or contract that prevented them from publicly acknowledging certain aspects of the relationship, identities, or personal lives while they were in the band. And it has also been discussed that since One Direction went on hiatus, that even though they're not in contract, that the NDA is still applicable. I don't know how that would be legally, but I mean, the music and entertainment business, it is a little bit wonky in the sense that it doesn't kind of go by the standard way other industries operate, but it talks about how there's been like a lot of discussions about how it might still be the expiration date of when the silence or the gag order to not talk about who you really are, or to not talk about certain aspects of your life, might have an expiration date that was way past when they were all released from the contract. So again, this is a fan theory, not a legal claim, but the theory is born from industry patterns that are beyond One Direction and Harry and Louis, like a long-standing industry practices that have been talked about. Observed PR strategies that, stunting is really a thing. It's built into PR plans. Lawyers, publicists have talked about it. Inconsistencies in interviews that fans have noted with their brilliant pattern recognition skills. Sudden behavioral shifts that have been noted over the years. And the intense control exerted over all 5 members during One Direction's heyday, or when they were like still performing as a band with Modest and Psycho. And fans, especially the veteran fans, clearly noticed the pattern, and the pattern kind of went the hallmarks of the pattern were like this. There were moments of obvious closeness followed by sudden distance, public narratives flipping overnight, PR relationships appearing and disappearing with uncanny timing, and also like timing that seemed lined up to certain releases and PR projects. So this NDA idea became a symbolic framework, not necessarily literal paperwork, although that stuff does exist, by the way, but a metaphor, but not really a metaphor. It's both metaphorical and literal, of the silence that shaped the public story, because it's not just happened to 1 or 2 people, it's happened to quite a few over the years. So here's where it gets interesting. So over the past year, especially in 2024 and 2025, as this year comes to a close, fans have become increasingly convinced that something is shifting, that whatever kept certain things under wraps, whether contractual, emotional, or situational, may be reaching an expiration point. And Louis just kind of like being out there and kind of hitting the mainstream and the Spotify downloads and the Grand Prix, it's like suddenly, there's always this criticism about Louis' PR team, like, aren't they doing enough? And suddenly Louis has shifted into a much more mainstream conversation, like back when One Direction was together, right? But so that's kind of one of the things that people have noticed is like, has something shifted? Because there there there's been a long discussion about, was Louis blacklisted, and that's why they don't play his music on radios, and now they're playing his music on radios. And the reason fans think this is the year breaks down into five major themes. So one is the 10-year cycle. Fans have noticed that many industry contracts, publishing deals, management agreements, and branding partnerships operate on 5 to 10 year cycles. 2025 marks a major milestone from the end of One Direction's formal obligations. And Louis stayed with Psycho an additional 5 years. So he didn't finally leave the whole Simon thing, Simon umbrella, till 2020. So 2025 is the 5 year mark. So it's kind of like 2025 falls into a 5 and 10 year mark, both for One Direction and for Louis, and for Harry. Okay. Two Harry silent eras. So Harry's current hiatus has fans chattering about. He's been quieter than usual, reflective, almost resetting. And they say, especially the ones who've been around a while, have said that whenever Harry goes silent, something big usually follows. And he just recently shaved. So is he preparing to go on tour again and record an album? Because Harry's sort of like hiding behind the beard and mustache was almost like paralleling his reclusiveness. And now that he's fresh faced again, it's like, is this a signal that he's ready to go back into the limelight? All right. 3, Louis' momentum. So Louis has been building visibility at the Vegas Grand Prix, radio play, tour rumors, edits going viral. His 2025 energy ever since the dropping of Lemonade feels like he's stepping into an unfiltered era. 4, the fandom reawakening. So statistically, Larry content saw a spike in late 2024 and early 2025. Apparently, that was measured by TikTok edits, Reddit deep dives, new fans discovering old clips. The nostalgia wave has made everything feel freshly alive. I think that's also partly due to the fact that after we lost Liam, people got nostalgic, and then they said that suddenly the One Direction was like really being streamed a lot in shortly after Liam Payne, we lost him. So, it's kind of like the algorithm. People were watching on Spotify. People were getting nostalgic. People were watching old videos. People were discovering Larry for the first time, even if they had been a Directioner since 2010, and a whole bunch of new people who were more fans of the solo Harry and Louis had kind of fallen down the rabbit hole, like I did with the One Direction, and then suddenly, oh, there's this Larry Stylinson thing, and then I got really into it. Okay, 5 is the symbolic convergence. So fans point to the emotional alignment. Harry's quieter, Louis louder. Harry retreating, Louis emerging. Opposing arcs that historically have preceded major shifts in their narrative. And because fandom is all about pattern, symbolism, and timing, 2025 feels like a narrative accumulation. Now let's go deeper into the fandom logic, the patterns that get cited over and over again. Remember, these are interpretations, observations, analysis, and everyone sees things through the lens of their own internal world, but the chatter is fun to look at. So this is the narrative lens fans use to read the cultural texts of Harry and Louis, and again, they're not claims. So again, here's a familiar pattern. Sudden PR relationships, the stunting returned. Fans of long track relationships that appear suddenly, vanish quietly, coincide with major milestones or public narratives. The timing often seems strategic and too cleanly aligned with promotional cycles, such as Zara and Louis were all over the place, and now you didn't even, Zara was sort of an after coverage after Louis performed at the Grand Prix. And then you've got the whole Harry Styles and Zoe Kravitz thing. And then it was sort of chattering, buzzing, and then it was like instantly a lot of people were saying, oh, stunt, 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 stunt. And then now you're just seeing Harry in Rome and not so much with Zoe. Okay. At times, the distance between Harry and Louis in the public eye has felt exaggerated. So there's this other pattern of extreme public distance, and it's as if the absence itself was engineered. Like fans point to unusual seating arrangements, body language, or interview restrictions, especially during the One Direction days. And then there's shifts in musical themes. So Harry's lyrics often explore longing, forbidden love, or silence. Louis's lyrics often explore separation, heartbreak, unfinished stories. Fans are connecting the dots. They're intersecting, and kind of like how their tattoos are complementary. Okay. Insider whispers and accidental slips. So whether true or not, fans love tracking. Crew stories, hairdresser comments, producer hinting, the occasional industry slip, and these feed the theory that something was being kept private. Well, you just got to listen to Lance Bass and Jordan Knight and all the stories of all the other closeted singers, and it's like it's almost a given, right? Career trajectory. So Harry moved into film, fashion, high art after the One Direction hiatus. Louis built a grassroots empire grounded in authenticity and rawness. Fans interpret these divergent paths as ways of surviving under restrictions. So the NDA theory isn't just a theory, it's an emotional framework because at its core, it's about love under pressure, silenced narratives, identity in the public eye, corporate control versus personal truth, and the shared longing of millions of fans who grew up watching something unfold between the lines, and the newer fans who caught up really quickly when they fell down the Larry rabbit hole and were like, oh my God, it was just hidden in plain sight, these two. So, whether the theory is literal or metaphorical, I think it's basically a bit of both. And I'm leaning towards the literal, but that's just my own personal opinion. I'm not claiming anything. It doesn't matter because in fandom culture, stories are what holds communities together. The NDA theory is in many ways the fandom's arc, a major fandom arc and theme. It's a story and it's a conversation born from the clues, contradictions, and emotional resonance that we've seen with Harry and Louis. So let's imagine purely hypothetically that 2025, the very end of 2025, brings a shift that carries into 2026. Fans speculate about several creative outcomes, none of which require a big reveal, but all of which feel symbolically monumental and seismic. So, one would be a creative shift, Harry or Louis releasing work that feels unusually direct, songs that speak plainly instead of around the edges, public softening, acknowledging fondness, an Instagram like, a public nod, a simple moment of warmth after years of stillness, telling a child reporter at Soccer Aid that, oh, I'm still really good friends with Harry Styles when they asked, do you know Harry Styles? Okay. Parallel interviews or appearances, so not together but aligned in tone or timing. Fans track synchronicity obsessively, such as the sock puppet, the color yellow, and the 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 complementary fruit from watermelon, kiwi to lemonade. Okay, a narrative correction. So a shift in how media references One Direction relationships, less censorship, more honesty. Nothing at all, but a symbolic change anyway. So sometimes the silence breaks emotionally, not publicly. Fandom reads emotional arcs as much as literal events, because sometimes it's the subtle, dramatic, and the unspoken that is the loudest. And that brings us to the real question. Is 2026 actually the year that something changes? If 2025 is anything to go on, or is it just another cycle of fandom hope? Well, here's the truth. The NDA theory persists because it fills a conversation. Maybe some people think it fills emotional gaps. I don't think so. I think it is the subtext, the underneath, the unsaid. The still waters run deep. It's the depth of the water. I'm using a metaphor because we know Harry and Lee love water. And the NDAs, they are a real thing, especially in entertainment. So it's not a fantasy. Um, I think the NDA theory resonates because it does make sense. And the thing is with theories, like you think of scientific theory, it's not a fact, but enough evidence keeps building and building that it almost could be, but it's not quite yet a fact, but it's really close. That's kind of how I see it. So The NDA theory makes sense to people who've watched Harry and Louis for more than a decade, through the fame, through the pressure, to the silence, the separation, and to the invention. And so far, 2025, going into 2026 feels like a culmination, but whether anything will happen in public, well, only time will tell. And then, we've been at least veteran Larrys have been watching for since 2010, so almost 16 years. So no matter what happens next, the fandom will keep reading the signs, noticing the signs, tracking the patterns, and interpreting the silence. And whether the NDA theory is symbolic, emotional, literal, I think it's all three. Me personally, opinion only. It speaks to the same truth that people care, that people notice, and some stories refuse to fade. So, what do you think? Do you think that we are at the precipice of a turning point? And what moment so far in 2025 has sealed it for you if you feel that we really are?